you're looking to dive into topics on how to live a happier, healthier, more fit, and long lifespan, then you've come to the right podcast. Livin the Dream with me, Coach Damian Evans. Together, we will explore the topics on all things health, fitness, and wellness. Together, we will be lifelong learners on this journey to living the ultimate dream. What up, team? Coach D here, coming at you from beautiful sunny San Diego. And we are back with the Livin the Dream podcast, where today we're going to cover the topic of training in order to help you reach your health and fitness and wellness goals in order for you to live that dream life you deserve. Today, we're diving into an article that the team over at the Levels Glucose Monitoring Company shared in their recent newsletter, all about the metabolic benefits of slow, steady Zone 2 exercise. You may have heard of it, Zone 2 cardio. Exercise that's easy, but not too easy. This kind of exercise can improve your fitness and your metabolic health. Here's how to do it. The article highlights Zone 2 cardio performed at 60 to 70% of your max heart rate can build endurance and improve metabolic health without requiring long recovery periods. So if you were to think like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for a little bit of period of time, Zone 2 cardio. The talk test, speaking a sentence while exercising. This talk test can help determine your personalized Zone 2 training level based on being below your ventilatory threshold. What does that mean? So when you exercise, your heart rate increases and your body's utilizing oxygen. And at a certain point, you're working out too hard for your body to refill the oxygen needed to continue doing that exercise. They call it your ventilatory threshold or your anaerobic threshold. This is just a place where you can't continue this pace forever. There is a certain state where if you maintain that state, you could go for miles and miles and miles without stopping. Longer Zone 2 sessions of 20 plus minutes, these type of sessions elicit adaptations like increased mitochondria, insulin sensitivity, and cardiorespiratory fitness. So mitochondria, those little energy powerhouses of the cell, increasing those is really important if you want to have more energy. Insulin sensitivity, your body, when it stores blood glucose, insulin is the key that puts that glucose into the cell. If you are sensitive to that, your body doesn't do that correctly, and Zone 2 cardio can help you with that process. And then cardiorespiratory fitness, just your cardio fitness, how well you do with cardiovascular training. Mixing Zone 2 with higher intensity training helps build an aerobic base without impeding other athletic goals. So a lot of times when you train for higher intensity work like sprints, or maybe you're going to train for something longer, higher intensity, like a marathon, this type of activity, it helps you build an aerobic base. But if you go to the extremes, sometimes it goes and it impedes other athletic goals or other aesthetic goals. The way that you look, the way that you perform. Zone 2 seems to be that sweet spot where you can still work on your aerobic base and not impede those other goals. You can still be a little bit more well-rounded. Super interesting. And then the article also highlights over time, Zone 2 exercise strengthens the heart, boosts oxygen capacity, and may contribute to longevity by maintaining cardiorespiratory fitness. Strengthening the heart, that sounds like a good thing. Boosting your capacity for oxygen and the ability to utilize oxygen, that seems like a great thing. And contributing to longevity. We would all like to live longer if it means that our health span is longer as well. Chances are you've heard a lot about high intensity interval training, or HIIT, HIIT, where bursts of near maximum effort alternating with bouts of lower intensity exercise. You may have heard about how HIIT is more efficient than slow and steady workouts, more efficient for fat loss and conditioning, and that when it comes to cardio, the only effort worth doing is one that's all out. Well, not so fast. In the past, let's say in the past decade or so, scientists, physiologists, and coaches have re-embraced the fitness benefits of slow, steady Zone 2 cardio. This exercise that keeps your heart rate in a zone between about 60 to 70% of your overall maximum heart rate, or you're able to hold a conversation without having to breathe too hard. So you don't really want to hold a conversation at this intensity, but you're able to. You might have to take a breath every 5 to 6 words, but you're not gasping every other word. That's more into the zone 3, 4, and 5. They even discovered some new unique benefits from this zone 2 cardio. In 2014, for example, scientists demonstrated that endurance athletes had greater gains in their ability to utilize oxygen. They had gains in their VO2 max. VO2 max might be a direct indicator of how well and how long you live. VO2 max, someone like Lance Armstrong, who probably has the best VO2 max of anyone that you've ever heard of, or a couch potato who has a very low VO2 max. Those would be the two ends of the spectrum. This is just a marker of fitness that measures the maximum amount of oxygen that your body can use at one time. So in this 2014 study, these scientists in this study saw greater gains in VO2 max when doing zone 2 cardio rather than only when these participants did HIIT or sprint training, which is super interesting. Usually we think more is better, harder is going to get you better results. In this case, it didn't. Since then, similar benefits have been found for recreational ultra endurance runners, where slow training helped with aerobic performance and body composition, but also for more high intensity exercisers like mountain bikers or soccer players. So if you want to be able to go really fast, recover, and then go really fast again, or if you just want to improve your overall cardiovascular health, experts say that the bulk of your exercise regimen should fall in this zone 2 range, the bulk of your exercise. There's an 80-20 rule when training. About 80% of your training should be in an easier zone. Only a small fraction, 20% or less, should be at higher intensities. Super interesting. So, what qualifies as zone 2 cardio? Well, it's exercise like running, cycling, or swimming, but that you do at a pace you can maintain for an extended period of time, at least 30 minutes, but potentially for hours if you had to. Alex Viada, who is an author of The Hybrid Athlete and founder of The Complete Human Performance, agrees that saying zone 2 is done at a pace that's almost infinitely sustainable, but it's still exercise. In other words, zone 2 gives you all the health benefits of exercise, such as improving your efficiency of your heart, reducing your blood pressure, lowering your risk of cancer and diabetes and an early death. But unlike higher intensity sessions, which can leave you feeling wiped out, they can cause really bad soreness, they could require days to recover from, zone 2 hits this sweet spot that's letting you reap the perks of exercise without overtaxing yourself, allowing you to recover so that you can then again do another bout, which over time compounded could be a lot, instead of just crushing yourself on a HIIT workout and then having to recover for days and days and then crushing yourself again and trying to guess when the correct recovery day is and not waiting too long before the benefits start to diminish. Well, zone 2 hits the sweet spot. It also helps you build endurance and helps you achieve metabolic flexibility, which is when your body can easily switch between burning carbohydrates and burning fat for fuel. Nowadays, people are pretty much really good at burning carbohydrates because that's what our body prefers as its primary fuel source. And when we overload the body with tons and tons of carbohydrates, we never get the opportunity to really go off of our fat stores or our adipose tissue stores or the triglycerides that come from fats that we eat. Yes, we do use those, but we are pretty much on a grand scale carb burning machines. Those that go keto, they're the ones that are taking the carbs all the way down, and they're making their bodies rely on their fat fuel sources, becoming a fat burning machine. But really what you want to be is you want to be flexible. You want to have metabolic flexibility so that you can switch between carbs and fats. And zone 2 seems to help you get there. But getting into the zone of zone 2 can be challenging, especially at first, especially if this isn't really what you do for a living. If you're an accountant, if you work behind a desk, if you are always on a computer and you don't know anything about fitness, like how would I know how to get into the zone of zone 2? Most people tend to either exercise way too hard, go too hard, too fast and burn out, or way too easy. They underestimate what they can do. They don't really realize that the burn is not an injury happening. It's pain with purpose. And some people shy away from that pain. And zone 2 is going to be different for everyone. And even you, a year from now, your zone 2 will look different based on what you do in this next year. If you train consistently and you build your capacity for exercise, your zone 2 now is going to look less intense than your zone 2 a year from now. It's based on your maximum heart rate. This is going to guide you and help you very well to find your zone 2 and harness the benefits of your heart, your metabolic health, and your athletic performance. So before we talk about yes, it's 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, but what does that mean? How do I find that? Really, I like the subjective talk test tool to decide how you're there. But let's talk about what's happening in your body when you're in zone 2 training. And it might help you be able to kind of dial in once you feel it and if you're there or not. So exercise physiologists generally define 5 heart rate zones based on the intensity of your workouts. As you increase your pace and increase your resistance, your heart rate is going to increase. You're going to be working harder as your intensity increases. Yeah. At different heart rate zones, your body uses different fuel sources to create energy for your cells. This is going to drive particular reactions in the body. For example, at lower heart rates, zone 1, zone 2, your body is primarily using fat as a fuel source for your muscles. Now, this is a little bit deceiving because it's working off percentages. So percentage-wise, it is burning a higher percentage of fat than carbohydrates at these lower intensities. But we've talked about this before on the podcast where if you take the total amount of calories that you're expending, those higher zones are going to be burning more calories total than the lower intensity zones. You're just shifting how you're utilizing your fuel source towards fats as opposed to carbs when you're in these lower zones. And this is going to come in handy, and we'll talk about it in just a second. But at heart rates that take you above that ventilatory threshold, that anaerobic threshold, when you can't continue this effort for a prolonged period of time, you start to diminish in your ability to sustain what you're doing. When your breathing rate increases along with your heart rate and you can no longer talk comfortably, your body starts to use more glycogen, glucose, carbohydrates. So again, the higher intensities then percentage-wise shift the fuel source towards carbohydrates. Lower intensities shift the fuel source towards fat. How to determine if you're exercising in zone 2. Getting into the zone is key. There are many equations, some simple, like 220 minus your age. That could give you a really rough estimate of what your maximum heart rate is. And then just multiply that by 0.6 to get the low end, 0.7 to get the high end. Wear a heart rate monitor, wear some sort of Fitbit tracker that can give you your heart rate, and then just try to stay within those 2 zones. 220 minus your age, get that, multiply it by 0.6, 0.7, and there you are. You have zone 2. Now, of course, this is going to be a rough estimate. In some studies that have examined max heart rate in large populations, some subjects in their mid-20s had max heart rates as high as 220. So 220 minus your age is not really going to work for everybody. While even others had this at the same age were around 170. So a huge range from 170 to 220 at the same age. So you can see how this equation is like, okay, it's not going to work for all people, but it's a good starting point. And then once you get into that zone and you feel how you feel, you can do the talk test and you could see where you may lie on that spectrum of the 220 minus your age, using it for our zone 2 calculation. Finding your own zone 2 is going to give you the correct heart rate so you can establish an exercise intensity that you can maintain for longer sessions. That's going to be kind of what you're working towards. The talk test, if we want to talk about that simple test you can find to find your zone 2, you have this ventilatory threshold. They call it VT1, and it's based on your ability to speak while exercising. So start an activity like an easy walk, and then pick a 15-word sentence to say aloud. If you can say the sentence straight through, then walk for another minute or two. Then increase your speed. So maybe you're on a treadmill and you might start it at 1 mile an hour. You do your 15-word sentence, say it out loud. You talk through it easily. Okay, I'm going to walk for a little bit and then I'm going to increase. Maybe I increase it by 0.2. If you're on a bike, maybe you add a gear or increase 5 to 10 revolutions per minute. Now, once you've reached the new speed, say the sentence again. You continue increasing your speed until you reach a pace where you can't say the entire sentence without like trying to go too fast through it or without stopping to catch your breath. And when you get there, that's when you check your heart rate. And then you check your pace on whatever machine you're using or however fast you're going. That's going to be the peak heart rate of your zone 2 for that modality, whatever you're using, the bike, the treadmill. If you're walking outside, you're going to find your peak by doing this test. The distinction of the modality that you use is definitely essential because you're going to react differently based on whatever tool you're using. Like if you go on a bike, your heart rate is going to be a different zone 2 than if you're on a rower or if you are swimming. You really want to try to get your zone 2 based on what you're going to be doing as far as your training. I hope that makes sense. Like if I'm a cyclist, I'm going to be able to push much harder at a much higher power output and go much faster on a bike because I'm a cyclist and I'm more efficient at that, more than the average person who never rides a bike. So my zone 2 heart rate on a bike will be different for my bike and then if I go running. So find your zone 2 for every modality doing this test. And then if you want, you can use your heart rate from that point on for zone 2 training in whatever modality that you have tested it on. Over time and over training, you're going to get fitter. So the effort required to reach the heart rate will change over time, right? You're going to get better at utilizing oxygen the more you train. So this zone 2 is going to shift. And hopefully if we're doing things correctly, it's going to shift up. So we'll be able to go at a higher heart rate and still be able to maintain, or a higher intensity actually, and your heart rate will be the same. If you are at the same intensity now as a year later, hopefully the same intensity a year from now, your heart rate will be much, much lower if you're training correctly and you're progressing as you would like to. But the heart rate itself, which is a percentage of your overall max heart rate, that heart rate zone shouldn't change, 60 to 70%. If you have an Apple Watch, if you have a Fitbit, or if you have any other wearables or heart rate monitors, it may display time spent in certain heart rate zones. You just want to know that those zones are based on them and their company, and it may not accurately reflect, even if it says zone 2, it might not reflect what your zone 2 is. On mini watches, these are just based off of the 220 minus your age formula, which is going to be like the most broad general. It's like using BMI, your body mass index, for professional athletes is not going to be a very good measurement. It is good for the mass populations, and it's good for studies when it comes to like thousands and thousands of people. But these wearables are not going to be super, super accurate when it comes to telling you what zones you're in. How to get started with zone 2 training? Well, zone 2, it's going to change your heart, your athletic capacity, your metabolic health, but it's not a quick fix for everything that you're doing. While you might start feeling better in a short period of time with zone 2, a lot of big adaptations of cardiovascular training are going to take a long time. Just as with everything, you want to get super strong, you want to get super shredded, it will take consistent training and it's going to take time. Your heart just doesn't magically remodel itself and get stronger in the course of a few weeks. It takes months, it even takes years. It's going to take that long for significant changes, but it's worth it. To really see the benefits of exercise, we need to find something that we can do for a long period, that we enjoy, that we look forward to week after week, month after month, into the year time frame. Fortunately, because Zone 2 is so doable for almost everyone, you don't have to wait to start, and you don't have to have a huge, big investment on toys, tools, gear, whatever. Use the test that we talked about to determine your Zone 2 level of effort on whatever you're going to be doing. Maybe you're walking around with a backpack on, you're rucking. Maybe you're speed walking. Maybe you're rollerblading, jump roping. Maybe you're underwater basket weaving. I don't know. But make sure whatever you test yourself on, you do it on what you're going to be training with. And work your way up by doing more Zone 2 training each week. The goal amount per the CDC guidelines is 150 minutes per week. 150 minutes per week. That's going to be the bare minimum. It will get you pretty good results, and you will be ahead of the majority of the American population if you just do 150 minutes per week. Eventually, we're going to try to maybe up that a little bit, especially if you really enjoy what you're doing. And I love it if you can stack it with getting outside. Perform Zone 2 with any type of cardio: walking, running, rowing, cycling, even elliptical training. These all can be done as Zone 2, as long as you keep your heart rate low enough to pass the talk test. For some people, this is probably going to eliminate jogging, because not all of us are great joggers. Not all of us jog all the time. And I know that when I jog, I am huffing and puffing, mostly because I run with my ego and I always have to try to pass that person that's in front of me. I don't know why. Why am I like this? Why was I born like this? I don't know. Talk to my parents. But the first major pitfall of Zone 2 training is going too hard. So you want to try to avoid that. It should be incentive for you to kind of dial back your intensity, increase the amount of time you do it, dial back the intensity. Again, if we go up into those higher intense zones, the HIIT training, the sprints, that causes more stress. Sometimes stress is good, but this causes more stress that you need to recover from. So now you have that longer recovery time. We are looking for more frequent bouts of Zone 2 at a lower intensity with longer periods in order to really maximize what we're getting from our cardiovascular training, our heart health, our brain health. It's super normal to go too hard. When people start, they may just start off with an easy jog, something that they thought is easy, but this is something that they did like in high school or in college. That was an easy jog then, but they haven't done anything for the last 20, 25 years. That same speed is going to be incredibly hard in higher intensity, even though it may seem mentally, because your mind is always like, yeah, I can do that. But then your body's like, wait, hold on. We haven't been training for that. So it's okay to go a little too fast at first and realize it, use the talk test, and then think about kind of dropping the ego and maybe just think about walking. I love walking. I'm walking everywhere. I get about 20,000 steps a day, which is probably a little on the high end. Most of the places that I'm walking like I'm late. So I have a little bit of oomph in my step, but it's nothing that I'm going to start sweating. I definitely could hold a conversation while I'm doing it, but I am taking my normal walking gait that if I had nowhere to be, nothing to do, and I just started walking, and I'm increasing that by just a tiny bit. And that's okay. You're not going to be immediately in Zone 2 3 minutes into your walk. You're going to have to build that up. If you can continue walking that for 5, 10, 15 minutes, now I get into that Zone 2, and now I can start reaping those benefits. So the pressure to feel like you have to be going faster. This is one of the reasons why people say they hate cardio. It hurts their joints, their knees, their hips, their shins, because they go too fast, go too hard, go too soon. And that's why Zone 2 can be made so enjoyable. When people go too hard, it can hurt a lot. It can be too much recovery. It can beat you up pretty quickly. It's fine if your heart rate moves into Zone 3 sometimes, but most of us, we like that burn. We kind of, if we're going to exercise, we want to feel something. We want to feel like we're almost like masochistically doing damage. If I'm going to take this time to work out, I'm going to get my money's worth, and I'm going to make sure that I go balls to the wall and crush myself and throw up at the end of this, right? Like, yeah, I'm not even going to lie. I've been there when it came to training for sports and stuff like that. So That's where you're going to get in trouble though. Zone 2 is going to feel different than your normal exercise training, what you have in your head of what you think this is. So just make sure you have a tangible measurement tool that you can use. And mix zone 2 with other types of training, of course. Zone 2 should not be the only thing that you do. You could have a pretty good life fitness-wise if you only did zone 2 cardio, but strength training is so important. You want to commit to strength training at least twice per week, hitting each major muscle group twice per week at least. To most people, this looks like a full body workout twice a week, or maybe like splitting the body up into upper lower and doing 4 workouts a week, upper lower. And then once you have your resistance training, once you have your zone 2 cardio, you want to do like 1 workout a week where you're high intensity. This could be something where you're empty in the tank, where you're Michael Easter from the Comfort Crisis. He says, burn the ships. This is like, go for it and really utilize some of those fat fuel sources in the bottom of the gas tank. He uses this. He goes on a run in this, like, I think it's, what's the one out in Las Vegas? The Sahave Desert? Someone's going to correct me on that. Whatever it is, the desert out in Las Vegas, and he runs with his dog. And Stockton, who's amazing, go follow them on Instagram. Really enjoy the content. He just wrote a book, The Scarcity Brain, as well, which was great. Comfort Crisis is one of my top books. Gotta read The Comfort Crisis. But anyway, he does the 1 workout a week, high intensity. He does that on Sundays. Feels like it's a great start to the next week. And then he's mostly zone 2. And then the strength training is going to be really important. And then throwing in flexibility training and mobility training. I just throw in my mobility training at the beginning of every workout, 5 minutes doing mobility moves, dynamic stretches of the movements that I'm going to be performing. And then I do my static deep stretching at night while I'm watching TV. If I have home from work, super tired, I get on the floor instead of getting on the couch, put a big yoga mat with a bunch of blankets down, and I just do some static stretching while I watch a basketball game, or we watch a Netflix, or whatever the case may be. So you don't have to, I know this sounds like a lot, like you're telling me to do 150 minutes of zone 2. You're telling me to do 2 days a week of strength training. You're telling me to do 1 day a week of high intensity, and then I have to stretch and mobility every day. Like, yeah, it seems like a lot. So start small. Start with whatever you think you can do. Start with something that you enjoy. Start stacking it with the things that you already have habits. So if you always wake up and you go to make some coffee, and you sit there and you wait for your coffee to brew, well, that's a perfect time to do 10 squats and 10 countertop push-ups, or just do 10 and 10 back and forth until the coffee is made. And then now you have your coffee and now you did your movement for the day. Like, that could be a great starting point. Then that time turns into a little bit more time, and then you take an actual dedicated hour or half hour to go somewhere to lift some heavier weights and progress. Only once you've made that a habit, only once you've made that a part of your routine. And finally, if you might be asking yourself, if you do lift weights, or if you do high intensity interval training, like, when should I put my zone 2 cardio? Should I do it on an off day, which a lot of the experts do suggest doing your zone 2 cardio on days that you don't lift. But if you are lifting, do I lift and then do my cardio, or do I do my cardio and then lift? Well, there's so much nuance here, and it's kind of splitting hairs, but all my career, I've told people that if you want to get stronger, if you want to lose body fat, if you want to build muscle size, you want to lift before you do your cardio. Because when I told them that, the cardio that they were doing was such high intensity cardio that they would burn themselves out if they did it first, and then they wouldn't be able to lift heavy. So of course you would want to lift your weights first, but this zone 2 cardio is not super fatiguing. So zone 2 before your lifting sessions might be a good way to warm yourself up. Super nuanced, and it's all about what is best for you and works best for you. But just know you can input your zone 2 cardio in. For me, what I do, I love to lift. I do my lift first, and then I go to a basketball court and I do a couple of form shooting shots. I kind of like move around and get some movement there. That's my zone 2 cardio. Like, I am breathing hard. I could hold a conversation, but my heart rate is up pretty much. Like I'm going around, I'm hitting these spots. I'm not just like doing a horse shoot by myself. No, I'm like getting my form shooting in. And then I go into the sauna, and the sauna is supposed to maximize the benefits from the lifting. Am I kind of hindering my strength gains by doing that basketball post lift? Maybe. Some experts talk about how that cardio could be further breaking down the muscle tissue and requiring more of a recovery time and more protein and fuel and building blocks to be able to repair that than had I not do the basketball afterwards. And then some say that the sauna helps to maximize your muscle gains, which I totally believe in, doing sauna right after the heavy resistance training. But this is splitting hairs. Like, you should not have to worry about any of this when you're first starting. You should be thinking about the basics, and the fact that you're just getting it in one way or another, the fact that you're doing something that you enjoy and that is filling your cup, that right there is way more important than any of these minute 1% details that could be better this way or that. Like, just do it. If you enjoy it, do it. If you feel like you're starting to get overtrained, if you feel like you're getting less strong when you should be getting stronger, if you feel like you're getting burnt out, that might mean that you're doing too much. But most people, I would say the majority of people, they do not hit that line. There are some freak fitness fanatics that are always playing with that line where they're doing too much or overtraining. But you probably know if that's you or not. So do what's best for you. Do what works for you. Do what you enjoy. Do what you can do consistently, because it doesn't matter if it's the best thing in the entire world. If you can't do it consistently, then it's not even as good as the worst thing. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. It gives you some guidance towards what Zone 2 training could mean for you. I love the idea of Zone 2 training. I'm not a huge high intensity person. I do think that you should throw those high intensity sessions in every once in a while, especially if you want to maintain your ability to sprint and jump. Most people listening to this right now, if you went out and sprint for the fastest you could sprint in 10 seconds, you probably would pull a hamstring. I know I would if I did something like that at an intensity that I wasn't ready for. I try to sprint at least 2 or 3 times a week for just a little bit amount of time, and I try to jump. But hopefully Zone 2 is something you can do sustainably and maximize the results of this not so damaging form of exercise. Give it a shot. And if you have any questions on what that may look like for you, reach out. I'd love to help you out. And that's it, my friends, for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us on this Training Tuesday episode of the Livin the Dream. Share the knowledge that you gained today with your friends and family and hold each other accountable. If you enjoy this content, it helps a ton if you could post on your social media stories a screenshot of this episode and include one takeaway that you learned, and make sure that you tag me and share your journey. Tag me at livingthedream_podcast or at coachdamian_SD, and let us know how this episode benefited you. Let us know what we missed. Let us know what we got wrong. Tell us how you have done any type of Zone 2 training and how it makes you feel. Or tell us if you plan to start doing Zone 2 cardio and what that's going to look like for you. We want to know. Message us if you have any suggestions or tips that would help your Livin the Dream team that we can discuss on future episodes. I will be right here with you, working on making us stronger, happier, and healthier humans. Until next time, friends, keep living the dream.